back to unit one, I'm sorry, unit two. This is going to be, we're going to call this unit 2.2. And we're going to be talking about function notation. You guys should be somewhat familiar with this. We didn't use it a lot in geometry, but it should have been talked about in algebra. Just a little refresher. Function notation is another way that we can write a graph. So you guys are pretty familiar with y equals mx plus b, right? And and you guys learned that that is going to be the function, I'm sorry, the formula for a line, okay? Well, when you're making a line, you're essentially using a function. And all we're really doing is changing how it looks. And so one thing, so y equals mx plus b is now f of x equals 2x plus 7. Okay. Instead of using y, all we're doing is changing the verbiage and how it's written to f of x. Okay. When we talk about f of x, x is your input and the f of x is your output. Okay, I know sometimes, sometimes we make things more complicated than they have to be, but we have to at least understand um, it's the same rules apply, except we're changing how it looks to be in that function notation. Okay. So function notation is especially useful for finding a value in the range that corresponds to a certain domain value. All they're saying is the domain is our input, right? We're really familiar with our input being X. And then, of course, your output is your Y. And that is going to be your f of X now. So they're saying find f of X equal to 2x plus 7 and find f of negative 3. So they're saying find this function, find the answer to this function when the input is negative 3. So you're going to rewrite the equation. We have f of negative 3 equals 2 times negative 3 plus 7. So 2 times negative 3 is negative 6. Negative 6 plus 7 is 1. So you would say f of negative 3 equals 1, meaning the input of negative 3 for this function equals 1. Take a look at some of these equations. So now we have an input of f, and this is where you have to realize that f is going to be one function, and we also have another function that they call g, and we have a function down here that they call p. You basically, these are just different names for different functions. So whenever they're saying the f function with the input of negative 9, you need to be using the f function that they give us up here. If they say the g function of negative 7, yeah, let me add some colors. If they're saying the g function of negative 7, then we need to be using the function of g. Okay, well, let's go ahead and plug in some of these numbers and do a little bit of algebra to work it out. So we have the input of negative 9, or the f of negative 9, is going to be negative 5 times negative 9 minus 14. All I did was use this function and inputted negative 9. 5 times negative 9 is going to be now positive 45. And then 45 minus 14 is now going to equal 31. So the input, sorry, f of 9, or the input of negative 9 in the function of f, is going to equal 31. All right, let's take a look at g. So same thing, we're just going to use this function now, the g of x, and we're going to plug in negative 7. So f of negative, I'm sorry, g of negative 7 is negative x, and we need to put a parenthesis because we're substituting, squared, plus 9 times x again, which is negative 7, minus 1. And of course, we're going to use our PEMDAS and do order of operations. And so we are going to take care of the exponent first. So -7 times -7 is now +49. Then we bring down our negative symbol. Then we have a +9 times -7, -63. And then we bring down our -1. Since these are all negative, I'm just going to add them up and keep my negative symbol, which is going to be -113. So G of -7 equals -13. Okay, now let's take a look at 5 and 6. These are the ones where I tend to see some of my students have a hard time with. And what you need to know is that you need to solve each function first. So we have f of 1 and f of -4. And then once you find the answers to those functions, then they want you to subtract the answers. So let's go ahead and plug them in. So we have f with the input of 1. So f of 1 is going to be -5 times 1 minus 14. And I'm going to put this inside of a bracket so I know to do my subtraction last. And then f of -4 is going to be -5 times -4 minus 14. Okay, so I'm going to get -5 minus 14, which is -19. And then I'm going to keep this in a bracket, or I could change it to a parentheses, either way. And then I have -5 times -4 is 20, +20, minus 14. And that's going to leave me with 6, +6. Okay. Now I have these as simplest terms, and I can go ahead and get rid of my brackets by making sure I'm distributing the negative into the 6. So that 6 would now become a -6. So I have -19 minus 6, which is now I'm going to add, so it's -25. So my function f of 1 minus f of -4 is going to equal -25. We have to first find the function with the input of 12, and notice how they put a bracket around it so that they tell us that we need to handle what's inside the bracket first. And then once we find the function with the input of 12, we're going to multiply that by 2. So we have g, our function of g, so that's going to be negative x squared, and now our x is going to be 12 squared plus 9 times 12 minus 1. 12 times 12 is 144, and then I bring down my negative symbol. 9 times 12 is 108, and then minus 1. And so going from left to right, -144 plus 108, we get -36. And then bring down my -1, -36 and 1 is going to be -37. So so this is the first step to our function. We found out what the input of 12 is. So now we need to go ahead and do our last step, where the input of 12 times 2. So I'm going to bring my 2 down here. So just want to draw an arrow so you know where I'm getting that 2 from. 2 times -37 is -74. And we're done. All right, let's take a look at 13. And what they're asking us, they say find f of x, find if f of x is 34. So remember, f of x is only y, right? We just changed y to be f of x. So they're saying find the output, I'm sorry, find what x is when the output is y. So let's rewrite this. So what they're saying, if this was our y, if this was y is equal to 3x plus 19, and they're saying that y equals 34. I'm going to rewrite the problem where if our y equaled 34 and we have 3x plus 19. So what they're saying is plug 34 into f of x and solve for x. That's all that means. I'm going to go ahead and subtract 19 from both sides. We have 15 equals 3x. Subtract both sides by 3, x equals 5. All right, let's take a look at number 15, a number for A and B. And now we have a word problem, and word problems are the foundation, or really the point to understanding a function. Okay, you need to be able to set up your equation and know how to use that equation. So it says Owen paid a landscaping company $108 for an initial lawn treatment, then $74 per month after that. The function P of t equals 108 plus 74 times t represents the total amount of money he'd pay after T months. T is going to be the time, the amount of months, right? And that makes sense. The initial deposit was $108, and then after that, they brought the price down to 74 per month after that. So they want to find what is the P of 24? Basically, what does this represent? Well, we know that T, they told us T is going to represent months, right? They said after T months. So then if P of T equals this amount, then P of 24 is going to represent 24 months, right? So we would say P of 24 represents 24 months. Hey, you guys, I just wanted to interject right here because I realized that the 24 months was true, but the input of 24 months actually includes the total of the price he'd be paying for 24 months. So P with the input of 24, yes, it is 24 months, but we're talking about the whole price he would pay over the 24 months. How long has Owen been receiving lawn service if he paid a total of $2,994 to date? They want us to find the amount of months it took for him to rack up a bill of $2,994. So let's go ahead and set up our problem. Remember, this is our output for the function that they gave us, right? This is the total amount. So we are going to say that the output is $2,994. And the way we got there is adding the 104 plus the 74 times t. And so they want us to find out t, how many months. So we're going to go ahead and solve for t. And then we're going to subtract both sides by 74. So we're going to see that when we plug that number into the calculator, T equals 39 months. So he paid a total of $2,994 in the course of 39 months.